Welcome to CTR Cyber 5. 5 tips in 5 minutes to improve cybersecurity internal controls. I am your host, Jenny Hederman, Risk Counsel with the Office of the Comptroller. Our guest today is Thomas Cesso, Chief Information Security Officer at Salem State University. He is the chair of the Higher Education Information Security Officer Council with over 30 years of experience in IT, information security, risk management in Fortune 500 consulting, global financial services, and academia. He's a member of InfraGard, an affiliate of the FBI. He's managed IT consulting for Ernst & Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's led the recovery from the World Trade Center on 9/11 as global head of technology for Citigroup. And he's the subject of a book, Adventures of an IT Leader, an HBS Business Case, Jack Carlisle, CIO, by Austin and Nolan. Thomas is going to be sharing 6 tips for prioritizing resources to prevent cybersecurity incidents. And here we go with cyber tip number 1. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us.
Jenny, thank you for that kind introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here, and let's just jump right into the tips. Cyber tip number 1, governance, risk management, and compliance. From the top down, make sure you're communicating to your board of trustees, your board of directors, whoever your governing body is, to make sure they understand what the risks are and how you're addressing those risks is very important. And in addition to that, and this is really a top-down thing, steering committee, establish a steering committee. Meet regularly, maybe quarterly. Tell them what you're doing. Get their input. Making sure you have everyone involved from all different functions of your institution or your organization. Get them involved and get them to take ownership. Very important. Help them make decisions around what you do and don't do and prioritize. Risk assessments and mitigation plans. You need to figure out sort of like, where are we? Snap a baseline. Figure out where we are in terms of risk. And then what are the risks we're going to address and how do we address them? What's the game plan? Policies and procedures, right from the top down. What are our policies? Who's responsible? What are the procedures? All the way down to who's responsible for what in the different aspects of the organization. And the last thing, just as important, is depending on your institution, what industry you're in, or what data you have. Do we have to comply with HIPAA? Do we need to comply with personal information? Do we need to comply with payment card industry information? Or a combination of all of them? You know, you might be a school that has a clinic, takes credit cards, and also has, personal information on your students and faculty. So governance top down. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2. Training, awareness, and culture. Look, there's a lot of technology out there, but at the end of the day, it's about humans. People are on the front line. They're the front line. They're the first line of defense. We need to educate them, help them be aware, help them defend all this massive attacks that are happening every day on the humans. And at the end of the day, the bad guys are trying to trick humans into doing things, either by pressuring them or faking them, saying they're one person and they're really somebody else from faraway lands. So general awareness training to better protect your employees, your physical and information assets, and your reputation. Vitally important. Require the training. Get everyone on board. This is to protect the employees and also protect the institution. And if you're a union shop, get your unions involved in making training mandatory. A lot of the executive offices in Massachusetts are moving to make this mandatory to help us protect ourselves. And then, depending on your industry and the data you have, cyber compliance training applicable to, like statutes, personal information statutes, HIPAA statutes, whether it's state and local or it's federal, or also it could be international, GDPR. And then industry regulations, payment card industry, FERPA for higher ed, etc. So make sure you have that in mind as you're doing your training, so You can help the employees and the institutions comply with and reduce the risk around, making sure you're within the confines of statutes and regulations. And then at the end of the day, it's about changing the culture, encouraging people. If they see something that's all right, they get a crazy email or they're asked to send stored value cards to their boss, raise the red flag, ask for help, right? Get help in dealing with these issues so they can be prevented in the future, or they can identify a trend that could be dealt with, tactically. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3. I'm just going to touch on these, but cyber technologies and controls. Multi-factor authentication is the second line of defense. First is the humans and making them aware. Second is multi-factor, which is a second factor to log in. You need to implement that. That filters out 95% of business email compromise, which is the majority of the attacks on institutions. And it only takes one to bring an institution down. Endpoint protection, making sure all your devices are up to date on antivirus and stuff like that, so you're protected at the perimeter. Vulnerability management, making sure your software is updated and your infrastructure is updated. It's good practice. It's a fancy word for closing the holes on your infrastructure as it ages. And then stuff that's really old, it's called end of life. The fancy term is it's too old to keep maintaining, and so you need to pull that out. Windows 7's PCs are too old to update. Pull them out of production and put Windows 10s out there so you can protect yourselves. You can't update Windows 7s as an example. Privileges, general and domain administrative rights. Look, take a look at the way people are using things. If they're not using an application, remove the privilege. If you don't need it, shut it down, reduce your exposure. If you don't need the data, remove it, delete it. It's reducing your exposure. If you don't need it, get rid of it, and therefore you don't have the risk. And so reducing the access by employees that may not need it. And then there's these domain administrative, which are godlike rights to all the data and systems. You should only have a few of those in your organization. And if you have more than that, you should reduce those dramatically because they're an area of risk and they need to have extra procedural protections. And the last thing is, in today's modern day world, you don't need to have a data center. You can outsource this either in a software as a service, have someone run your financials for you, or send it in the cloud to transfer your risk over to the vendor. Let them maintain it. Let Microsoft maintain it or Oracle maintain it. You don't need to maintain the stuff. You can find vendors to do it. The caveat to that is make sure you manage the vendors and they're up to snuff for, complying with cybersecurity, and they have the necessary precautions, which is better vendor management. When you throw it over the wall, make sure the person you throw it over to is up to snuff. That's cyber tip number 3. Cyber tip number 4. Look, we talked about the first line of defense is the employees and helping them be aware. The second line is multi-factor authentication. Now, if those don't work, if the bad guys get through those lines of defense, you have to expect that this will happen sooner or later. It's not if, it's when. And when it does occur, you need to be able to address that. Continuity of business, disaster recovery, backups. These are fancy words for dealing with the bad guys when they come in and what havoc they may wreak when they get in. And I call this depth and defense. Hope for the best and expect the worst. Your first line defense is people. Second line is MFA. The third line is, oh my gosh, they're in. Now we got to recover because they may have taken over your systems. So you need to take a step back and prioritize. If we had to recover to, in an hour from scratch or, in 6 hours, how are we going to do that? Who are the most important people, the critical systems, the critical assets, both information and physical assets, So you need to develop a business impact analysis. That's a fancy word for figuring out what's critical and you have to bring up and running very quickly. And then in addition to that, you need to think about incident response. There could be little incidents, there could be big incidents, which may bring you into continuity of business, disaster recovery, etc. You need to develop these plans and then test them out and practice them and get better. These are important as a just in case. And the last thing in this area is backups. Backups a fancy word for, where do I store my backup data, my data that I need to use to recover? It's going to be off-site or in the cloud or somewhere where it's isolated so it's protected if you get infected in your institution, on your premise or in your area. So this is backup. It needs to be isolated. It needs to be encrypted, which is a fancy word for scrambled, so only you can use it. And you need to figure out how you recover using the backups, and you need to practice that as well. So that's cyber tip number 4. Cyber tip number 5, cyber insurance. Now, this is kind of a misnomer, but let me give you the industry trends. It's about managing risks and buying really a service policy in the event something happens. So the industry trends are, that the underwriters for risk are learning more and more about the key aspects of risk. So you need to have prerequisites even to be able to comply. Sort of like when I get auto insurance, I need to have seatbelts and I need to have anti-lock brakes. Well, in the cyber world, you're running your business. Just to be able to get cyber insurance, you need to have multi-factor authentication. You need to have endpoint protection. You need to patch your critical vulnerabilities. You need to have a good backup plan. Does this sound familiar? It's good practice. So that's what we're talking about. And then it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's really a service policy. God forbid something happens in your institution. You call on your cyber insurance, and they have a team of experts, a panel of experts at the ready that can be brought to bear on the situation if you need it, should you be infected by a cyber attack. And these services, you don't hire all these people and have them full-time employees because they're expensive and they're very rare. But you want to have them at your fingertips, God forbid something happens. And those are people like personal identified PI attorneys, legal support, third-party notification to people that are affected by this, 1-800 call center, credit monitoring, regulatory notifications, forensic analysis, which is a fancy word for IT analytics to figure out what happened and how to fix it, ransomware negotiations, God forbid, crypto payments for ransomware, and also fines. So these are really important. And remember, what you're doing is by putting these prerequisites in place, these basic things, you're reducing your risk. And by getting the policy, you're transferring some of the risk to the insurance company. So I call it a transfer of risk. And the last thing is, a good way to look at this is in the cyber insurance industry, the applications are standard. So a broker will give you an application, and then they shop it amongst all these cyber insurance providers around the globe. Take that generic application and reverse engineer it. Do we have multi-factor authentication? Check. Do we patch critical patches within 30 days? Check. Do we have a encrypted disaster recovery backup? Check. So you get the idea. Look at that as a checklist for how we get better. And so that's good cyber hygiene and risk management and housekeeping by just looking at the application and reverse engineering it. So that was cyber tip number 5. Cyber tip number 6. Look, we're all in the same boat here. It's okay to ask for help, right? We're all in the same boat. We're all dealing with the same thing. We established and I'm the chair of the Higher Ed Information Security Officer Council. When something happens, we share ideas. What did you see? What did you do? How'd you deal with it? How'd you find out where it was? We share ideas, and there's a tremendous amount of resources out there. to help you out. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because no one, this is a rapidly changing area. So by exchanging ideas amongst your peers and your associates, you can really, help yourself out. And there are plenty of resources out there. There's information sharing institutions like the ISACs, multi-state ISAC, the REN ISAC. There's InfraGard, which is an affiliate of the FBI to protect infrastructure. There's Homeland Security. Even like Jenny at the Comptroller's office, they're terrific. They will help you, right? Or the Executive Office of Technology and Services. Look, these people are there and can help you. They have policies that they post. You could use those as a starting point for your policies. In addition to that, get a third-party review or assessment to figure out where you are, an objective one, and to snap the baseline of where you are, right? Auditors, training, a lot of the stuff is out there. And the other thing is you can do peer reviews. I go out to other institutions and they ask me to just check out what's going on and give them a little feedback. And I do the same thing. Peer reviews and collaboration is a terrific way of helping yourself, because I always get the question, what do the other schools do? It's sort of like peer review. So that's my cyber tip number 6. And I hope that you stay secure in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's fantastic. We really appreciate it, Tom Cesso. For more information on cybersecurity internal controls, check out our cyber page on macomptroller.org. That's Cyber 5 for today, and we'll see you again. Thanks for watching.